Alright, in this video I'm going to show you how to replace your rear pads and rotors on this Mustang here. This one specifically is a 2014 with the V6. This is going to be the same process for 2010 through 2014. If you have the GT model, it's going to be slightly different hardware there, but pretty much the same thing. The previous generation will be similar, as will be the generation after these. Anyways, as I said, we'll be doing the rear in this video. Within a few days of this posting, I'll also have a link in the description for the front pads and rotors as well. By the way, guys, if you want to get yourself some drilled and slotted rotors for your Mustang, I'll put a link in the description for that generation and V6 model. I'll probably also post up a link for the GT as well of the same generation. I'll post a link for all four corners, that way you get an entire set like I'm doing here. Best to do it that way. It wouldn't really make sense to put drilled and slotted rotors on one end and not on the other, so you're going to want to buy all four. So those are what the links will be for. And as I said, I'll post V6 and GT as well. So before you lift the car, you want to loosen your lug nuts half to a full turn. Alright, so once you have her up in the air and securely supported, you can go ahead and take your wheel off. By the way, guys, if you're looking to do new shocks and struts, I have videos on that as well. Make sure you check out the Mustang playlist for every video on this car, and there's quite a few in there. At this point, if you were just doing the pad, you could just remove the caliper here and leave the bracket in place. To do that, you would just remove the two caliper mounting bolts, and then she should slide out. Plus, when doing rotors as well, a lot of guys like to take these out. It's always a good idea. Pull your slide pins out and go ahead and grease them back up. That way you get good service out of them for years to come. And since I'm doing the rotor, we have to remove the whole bracket anyway, so I'll show that in a second. And sorry about the turkey, it never shuts up when I'm out here. Alright, so for me, those bolts were 13 millimeter. And then you should be able to slide your caliper off here. So you can just, let's see here, come in with a flathead screwdriver and just work on starting to pry her up off your rotor there. Alright, so there she is separated. Now you don't want to let this thing dangle. You can damage these brake lines, brake hoses here. So I typically use a cinder block like that, and I'll just set it on there off to the side. So there's the caliper, at which point your pads will just pop right out. Now here's the old hardware. This one just kind of fell from up top. I do believe it's supposed to be able to hold itself into place, but this one's just fallen on me, so that's the top piece and that's the orientation that it goes. Here you can see the bottom one. Now if your kit comes with new ones, if the old ones are in bad shape, always a good idea to go ahead and replace them. However, sometimes I've experienced with installing the new hardware that it's very difficult to get the pads to go back in. Just the tolerances are off sometimes. So typically if the old ones are in good shape, I'll reuse them. But if they're all rusty and whatnot, you definitely want to get them replaced if you can, so that your pads will slide appropriately. So now to get the bracket off so you can get your rotor off, you just got two larger mounting bolts here. Take those out and then take the bracket off. And those for me were those big old 15 millimeter head bolts. And I just wanted to show you guys this slide pin up in here that I mentioned briefly a second ago. So you have to separate, if you want to pull this out to lubricate it, you have to separate the rubber boot, which is going to be a little stuck there. You're going to have to use a flathead and pry that off, being careful not to tear it, and then your slide pin will come out. But as it sits, it's kind of seized up on that rubber boot there that you do not want to tear. Alright, so I separated the boot there. You can see it's all kind of rusty and whatnot. And then, as I said, they'll just slide out. So then there's your bracket. Pay attention to the orientation that it goes on. And then you can take your rotor off. If your sticks, you can just hit it. You're going to have to hit it several times, several places with the mini sledge to break it free there. And then it'll pop off. Also, you can squirt some PB Blaster penetrating oil around there. That's usually where they get stuck. Sometimes around the lugs there if they're bad enough. Alright, so install, reverse, or removal, but I'll go ahead and show little snippets here for you guys so I can throw in the torque specs for you for those who want that. So you can throw your rotor back on, bracket back on, caliper back on, new pads, etc. So at least with these, I get these, they're zinc coated, and they require no cleaning prior to installing. But a lot of rotors, you know, the basic ones like this, Pretty much all the ones from the auto parts store, they come with like a grease coating on them so they don't rust during storage. And if you have that, you'll definitely be able to tell because they're tacky to the touch. You have to get some brake parts cleaner and a rag and clean both sides and get that crap off, or your brakes will not work and they're going to smoke like crazy. But for me, these come zinc plated. They don't have any of that crap on there, so they're good to go out of the box. Got the bracket mounted back up. Got the new hardware installed, top and bottom. Remember, the rotor's still loose, so you probably have to wiggle it a little to get those in there. Now, sliding the pads back in, you see this little tang here, and you see how this one doesn't have it. Some kits, they'll come, every pad will have one, and some kits, only one pad for each side will have one. That's your little squealer there. When your brake pad gets low, it'll rub the rotor, and it'll make a squealing sound. So that's what lets you know that your pads need replaced. You always want to put that one on the back. If they don't all have them, you need it on the back, because generally the rear pad will wear faster, because the piston is where most of the pressure comes from, unless you have dual pistons on both sides, quad pistons, etc. But on a single piston like this, you're going to need that squealer on the back side. Alright, so there's the pads installed. Make sure you get them in the right way. The top is going to bow to follow the bow of the rotor there. And you see these little doohickeys there, they're real loose. You're going to have to kind of like squeeze everything together, hold them in place, and they're going to contact across that gap there in your caliper when you set this on there. So make sure you don't get those caught on a bind. Alright, now to get clearance for your now thicker new pads, you're going to have to get this piston pushed into the caliper all the way there. And I really hate these type. Generally, you put a C-clamp on here like this, and you'll press the piston in, but this is a twist type, so you're going to need big channel locks or big enough vice grips like that, and it's very tedious. You got to turn it clockwise to spin it all the way back in until it's flush all the way down here, so you have room for your new pads. Alright, then there's what it'll look like once you get it spun all the way in there to clear the pads. And I will say this one took a longer this one breaks the record for me. It took forever. At first I wasn't even sure if it was going in, but it was. I just had to turn the thing like, I don't know, 200 times. It was ridiculous. It took a while. Obviously be sure not to tear your rubber boot there in the process. So there's the caliper back on, and at the end of these slide pins here, the metal part there has a flat bottom to it, so you will have to line it up with that flat notch there, top and bottom, so that it will actually slide in there. And then of course you have these spring things here fighting you with tension as well to press down and get everything lined up all at once and get your bolts in there. So with everything torqued down, now you can throw your wheel back on and get that torqued down. Alright, you want to torque this in a crisscross pattern, like a star. You never want to go one to the next, so you go like this, crisscross pattern. Then you'll repeat everything on the other side, obviously, and then I got one more bit of information for you before you get back on the road there. I'm on the other side here, and I just wanted to show this real quick in case you guys ran into this. This one spun and spun and spun and spun and spun and just wouldn't go anywhere. I think you have to apply pressure pushing inward at the same time, which I did try and it didn't really work. But I noticed that like if I twisted it and pulled back, it would come out a lot. So I don't know if there's like little threads or something in there it's got to catch or whatever. I put my C-clamp on it, applied a good bit of pressure to it, took the C-clamp off, tried spinning it again, and now it's going in. So if you have trouble and it doesn't catch and doesn't want to go in, try pushing in while you twist it clockwise as well. If that doesn't work, apply some pressure with the C-clamp and then take it off and then see if it'll go. And that's what I had to do to get this side to go. Alright, so some cars, they have a lockout feature. It's for if you, like, say you blow a brake line, it'll lock out whichever set that is, either front or rear. That way you still have some brakes for driving. So with you pushing, or in this case twisting the caliper back in, you may have some space between the caliper piston and your rotor now. So if you just get in the car for one, you go hit the brakes, it's just going to want to go to the floor because it needs to make up that space. But you could also trick your system into locking out your rear brakes there because of that. So there's a specific way you want to go about this to ensure that that doesn't happen. Not to mention you don't want to get going down the road and the first time you go to hit the brakes, there's nothing there. So what you want to do, start the car, and you're just going to come down here and lightly pump the brakes. Do not press it more than like 50%. So let's see here. You just want to lightly and slowly press down. No more than halfway. Just like this. And you'll just do that several times until your pedal firms back up to what feels like normal, and then you're good to go. If this video helped you out, be sure to leave a like. There's always the super thanks button under the bottom right if you feel so inclined. Check out the Mustang playlist on the channel if you want to see more of the car. But with that, appreciate you watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Oh, and don't forget, if you're looking for the video for the front, again, within a few days after posting this one, I'll have that one up as well, linked in the description. As well as links for drilled and slotted rotor brake packages for these cars as well if you're looking to pick some up.